There's a school board in Florida that is just out of its mind. Listen to this dude, part of the school board.
Wow. I mean, if that's the way that you fight for the community, I hate to see the way that you fight for your family in need. The adherence to the radical.
So, some context, some atheists had just gotten up to complain about the fact that they're adding chaplains to schools in Florida. And this guy is like infuriated by the fact that there are like atheists in his little school board meeting.
The adherents to the radical leftism are the other side, by the way, and I wanted to make sure that that's clear. These are ideologies that are fighting against this program. Number two, if there was a student who came up here asking for, hey, I want to be chemically castrated because I'm a transgender ideologist, the school board members on this dais would pay for the Uber to send that student to go to the clinic.
Dude, are you kidding me? This school board leader or whatever thinks that schools pay for students to go to the hospital and get chemically castrated if they're trans? What? That's fucking psychotic.
But here,
and did you hear the woman yell, what, in the background? That's funny.
Would pay for the Uber to send that student to go to the clinic.
Shame.
But here, in this situation, a student comes and they ask for spiritual guidance because they need something that is different than what we're offering, and they want to cut it down.
Well, I mean, the student can get spiritual guidance from, like, their church, right? Why are you trying to cram this down kids' throats at school? How would you feel if Muslims sent an imam into the school? See, this is what's happening. They, as in this school board and other far-right extremists, are trying to replace school counselors with chaplains, with priests, basically. Weird choice, considering how these people seem to care all about children's safety, and they're putting, like, the most notorious predators known to man in these schools. Whatever, that's a story for another day. The point is that the Constitution says, basically, that you can't discriminate based on religion effectively, kind of. And that means if you're going to allow Christian chaplains into schools, you have to allow chaplains of all denominations into schools. And that's what these people were up here talking about. We're going to listen to some of the, the commenters, the public commenters that were complaining about this chaplain thing. They said, we're going to get satanic priests and stuff into these schools. If you open this door, then we're walking through with you. And this guy is just losing his mind over it. Look, it's all or nothing.
Or provide some lukewarm voting because they're running for office. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We can gaslight and obfuscate and confuse and deceive. But all those things are very clear to the people who love their children. And that's not what's being protected here today, as you can see. We can be honest, or we can be crazy and mentally ill.
Oh, I think that ship has sailed already.
Honest, or we can be crazy and mentally ill. You can choose that. You can choose that. But those things don't bother me and they don't scare me, and I'm not going to be intimidated by a bunch of crowds of people who don't care anything about our kids. Because I'm actually a man that will fight for his family and fight for his community, and I don't care what all these crazy people say.
Oh my God. Oh my God, dude. I'm actually a man? Okay. First time hearing of it. You know, fascism has, I think, hang on, I have this whole thing in my book about fascism. Again, check it out, Amazon. OwenMorgan.com, you can find it. This book isn't released yet, but it's about World War II era stuff. But I wrote this whole bit about fascism, and there are basically like 14 points to fascism as laid out by Umberto Eco. He wrote about something he calls Ur-fascism, UR-fascism. And he lays out these 14 points, and it's things like an obsession with a plot. Followers must feel besieged. There has to be a plot against them. The quickest and easiest enemies, often immigrants. Jews were viewed as immigrants in Germany. Muslims are immigrants in the United Kingdom. And Mexicans are immigrants in the United States. Fear of difference is another one. Fascism seeks consensus by exploiting the fear of difference, quote unquote. That's a quote from Umberto Eco. The people are commonly convinced they're being persecuted, so fear of intruders naturally emerges. Here's another important point of fascism. This is the point that I'm trying to get to. Number 12, machismo. Umberto Eco's article points out that machismo implies, quote, both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality, end quote. Nazis banned what they called degenerate art. Artists started making Nazi-approved sculptures and artwork. One famous piece was a sculpture of a naked man with unnaturally large muscles. They become absolutely obsessed with strength and, the male form. And it's just like, it's weird how much these people think about junk, I don't know. It's just really creepy. And when I hear people say things like this right here, that's all that's knocking around in my head when I hear them say it.
Choose that. But those things don't bother me and they don't scare me, and I'm not going to be intimidated by a bunch of crowds of people who don't care anything about our kids. Because I'm actually a man
that I can't, when he says things like that, or like when Andrew Tate talks about being a man and all that stuff, all I can think is that they have some kind of a weird inferiority complex or something. And this is one of the points of fascism. It's just wild, man. Anyway, Lucian Greaves showed up to this whole thing, and he gave a speech. If you don't know him, he's the leader of the Satanic Temple, I believe. And yeah, he's pretty awesome. He's very integrated into the community, knows people that I know, things like that. Just listen to what he had to say. I mean, remember, this is because the school board's trying to replace school counselors with pastors.
Some of your churches have not had the best records regarding childcare and safety. Maybe your church has had no such problems, but you cannot keep this program contained to your church. You cannot keep this program contained to your religion. Governor Ron DeSantis lied to you from the podium during a press conference after signing the school chaplain bill into law. He declared that Satanists would be disallowed. Such proclamations hold no legal weight and do nothing to overturn the Constitution, which guarantees religious liberty for all. Similarly, your Department of Education has released recommended policy guidelines that attempt to narrow the definition of religion to exclude Satanists.
Not just DeSantis, but also Ryan Walters in Oklahoma and others have been trying to exclude Satanists at all costs. And you know what? This is why Satanists exist. This exact thing right here. When Christian extremists push it too far and try to put priests in schools, Satanists can say, okay, well, we're walking through with you. And that's what's happening right now. If they don't like that, then don't allow priests in schools. Anyway, Ryan Walters, for example, and DeSantis, after pushing this bill, after getting it passed or whatever, or announcing that this is going to happen, there was a ton of outrage because Satanists were coming in too. And DeSantis and Ryan Walters and others said, Satanists are not going to be allowed in the schools. Don't worry, it's not happening. Yeah, here we go. This is it. This is from Ryan Walters after he put the bill in place, basically. Superintendent over Oklahoma schools.
Our kids to freely express their religious beliefs. And so we're very excited about this piece of legislation. Well, we've now had the Satanists come in and say they're going to offer courses too and get credit for it. So
that's how it works.
I'm just going to clear this up. No, the Satanists are not coming into our schools.
Yes, they are.
No, Satanism is not a religion. They will not be recognized by our...
They are recognized as a religion. It is a religion. You can say that until you're blue in the face, but it's not true.
Recognized by our State Department of Education. You are not a religion, Satanist. I know that you guys like lying, and that's a central part of your belief system.
It is specifically not part of their belief system, but okay.
System there. But you will not be participating with our schools. You will not be allowed in our schools, nor will you receive credit.
You're just wrong, bro. Anyway, the point is that, like, people really started freaking out when Lucian Greaves, for example, started putting, satanic priests in the same programs that Christians created for exclusively Christians. Again, this door opens, everybody can walk through.
This also holds no legal weight and defies all relevant legal precedent. So the short of it is, you're voting on a policy that is unpopular, divisive, poorly planned, obviously dishonest in its goals, unnecessary, and introduces new risks to children, even if you were allowed to implement it according to your wishes. The reality is you'll have to accommodate religious identities you may not agree with. You will end up with Satanist chaplains.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how the Constitution works.
Vote how you will. Good luck, and God bless.
Yeah, this dude is really interesting, Lucian Greaves. Anyway, the point is that these people, are kind of kicking themselves in the kneecaps, right? But when all of this Chaplin stuff really started, there was a Christian group who was pushing this really hard, who explained how they were going to get around the legal requirements to allow Satanists into the schools. How do we keep only Christian pastors in schools and not Muslims or Satanists or Buddhists or whatever, anybody else? And here's what they said.
But the left side will make innuendos. Well, now we're going to have Satanists as chaplains. First, Satanic is not a church, it's not a religion, it's
Yes, it is.
anti-God. So you just say, okay, and move on to the next one. Because I don't know any of you that would hire a Satanist, so you just look at their background and don't hire them.
Yeah, but you can't reject them for being Satanists, first of all. And second, trust me, there are people in the school system that are in favor of Satanists. They will get into the schools. They will. And even if they're not in favor of Satanists, some people respect the Constitution and are still like Republicans or right-leaning or Christian nutcases or whatever, and they recognize that they have no legal right to prevent people from coming into the school, so they're going to allow them in. That's just going to happen, bro. So your plan is not going to pan out the way you think it is.
I mean, I don't know people in their engineering firm or teachers or baseball coaches that have an outright Satanist and say, oh, yeah, well, we'll hire. So it's not an argument. It's a narrative.
The only other comment, one of the oppositions, well, anybody can be a chaplain then. I mean, a Muslim can come in and be a chaplain.
100%, yes. There are almost no requirements for chaplains in most states. I think that in some states there's like a a certification program that you take online on a state website. Some other states require absolutely nothing, and other states require like some certification from an independent board or something like that. It's like a few hours of training, stuff like that. It is so simple to become a chaplain, qualified, quote unquote, to enter a school and give guidance to students, whether it be religious or like for their future or whatever. It's so simple to do that it's straight up disturbing. It's easier to do this than to, I don't know, get qualified to become like a tour guide in New York City. Like, it's way simpler to do this, to become a chaplain.
And we just said, no, it has to be a certified chaplain. So that's how we kind of got around that.
Oh, and they're just not going to certify Satanists, is what he's saying. We got around that by refusing to allow Satanists to receive the certification. Oh, I see.
Yeah, thank you, Florida, for saying yes to it. And it was the NACL that really helped move it forward. And Ron DeSantis, upon signing it, says Satanists don't even apply. That's what he said to the media.
I mean, you can say that, but it's not going to work.
What he said to the media.
If you look at the Department of Defense list of approved chaplains for the DoD, there's not any Satanists. They're not there. They're not, according to the Supreme Court, they are not an organized religion. So.
Yes, they are, according to the Supreme Court. She's just like lying here. She's just flat out saying the exact opposite of the truth. There are no Satanist chaplains in the military, because there isn't a big demand for them, as far as I can tell. And hell, are there actually no Satanists, like, chaplains in the military? Are we 100% sure of that? Or is this another thing that she's just, like, making up? Anyway, chaplains in the military and in prison and in hospitals are legal. Or let me rephrase. Prison and military specifically, because those are, like, state-operated systems. Those are legal because, for one thing, they're multi-denominational, oftentimes. For another thing, people's freedom of movement is restricted in those conditions. So they're not free to just like go to a church whenever they want. So chaplains are made available to people who want them. Anyway, when kids walk out of a school, they can walk right into a church if they choose to. They're not like traveling in the Middle East or something to go to school. That's the difference.
It's a lot of fear-mongering among the narrative.
That there are crazy people.
Fear-mongering among the narrative. Is she just like saying words? Do those things, like, do those words mean anything when put next to each other?
It's a lot of fear-mongering among the narrative.
That there are crazy people. We had the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster and a minister from the Church of Satan actually showed up and told all my school board members that, in fact, that they were going to apply to be a chaplain and all this
Good.
kind of stuff. But, I think there's actually, what I was told is that there actually are appeals court at the federal level precedents out there that basically make it clear that the Church of Satan is not a legitimate religious faith.
I love it. So she just said the Supreme Court decided that Satanists are not a legitimate faith. And then this guy is saying, I think that these appeals are in the process of determining. No, that's completely made up. You know, atheism is considered a religion for legal purposes. So it's kind of categorized as like a religious stance, basically, a religious position on the question of religion. So atheism is protected under freedom of religion and everything, the same as every other group out there. You have to allow atheists and Satanists and every other religion out there the same equal rights, even if it's a parody like the flying spaghetti monster. You allow exceptions for people who want to wear hijab when they get their picture taken at the DMV on their license, then you have to allow that exception for flying spaghetti monster adherents to wear colanders on their heads too. It's kind of the idea behind, the parody religions. It's just how it works, baby. Welcome to the Constitution. First time?
And is not entitled to protection as Christianity would be.
See, they want special treatment is the point here. They're looking for special treatment from the state, and they're complaining and crying when they don't get that special treatment, claiming that they are being persecuted for not being treated special. These people are jokes. So I want to read just like a little bit of this Hemant Mehta article on the subject, friendlyatheists.com. This is all like about that whole school board meeting. You may recall that earlier this year, Florida passed a bill allowing untrained Christian chaplains to volunteer in public schools, essentially as substitutes for trained social workers and counselors. Yeah, and one more thing. A lot of people in this realm are making an excuse for this, saying, we want to free up funds for students to use in other areas, or maybe the school can't afford a counselor or whatever. That's not an option, okay? You don't give students worse service on something like this and disadvantage others because you can't afford it. Pull that money from somewhere else, or don't have counselor in there at all if that's what it needs to be. You can't privilege special groups like that. Anyway, there were some caveats to HB 931. Parents had to be informed about the religious affiliations of those chaplains. Okay, I can appreciate that, I guess. They had to give permission before their children could see them. All right. I mean, they shouldn't be in there at all, but that's not too bad, I guess. Not as bad as I feared. All potential chaplains also had to pass a background check. All that's fine, but it's the bare minimum. Totally agree. Notice it doesn't say anything about chaplains being certified in any way or whatever. It's just background check. Oh, great. Well, at least there's that. We always knew what this would look like in practice. If a school district approved that kind of program because the state told them it was legal, there would be a line of Christian chaplains out the door just waiting to get the green light. And anyone could be a chaplain. There are no special credentials they need to prove they're up to the task of helping kids. If they had the blessing, so to speak, of a local church, they would be good to go. And you could easily expect some pastors would hand out certificates of chaplaincy to anyone who wanted them, much like they did with COVID vaccine exemption notes. I know. They were advertising on their public platforms that I'll mail you a COVID exemption if you just, send me a... God, it was so ridiculous. I remember that. Simply put, there would be nothing stopping those adults from using public schools as target practice for conversions. All they needed was permission from parents, and they could do whatever it took to lure kids to Jesus. Yeah, and the even more bizarre and disturbing part of this is evangelical people, they call themselves non-denominational, but it's kind of like a subset of Pentecostal to some degree. They have a lot of the same beliefs as Pentecostals, like speaking in tongues, faith healing, and prosperity gospel and things like that. Those people seem to be the loudest, and right now maybe the largest Christian demographic, largest Christian denomination. I'm not sure. Evangelical Protestant here, 25.5% of the Christian religious demographic in the United States, 25.5%. Mainline Protestant, 15%. Historically Black Protestant, 6.5%. Catholic, 20%. So yeah, evangelical Protestant is the largest religious denomination or Christian denomination in the United States, looks like. And they are the loudest people on planet Earth. They just scream about being persecuted nonstop. It's wild. So you know that the majority of chaplains trying to enter schools are going to be like evangelical nutcases that preach about prosperity gospel and faith healing and stuff. Oh, you're dealing with depression because your dad hits you? Just pray the depression away. See how simple that is? Look, I'll put my hand on you and we'll pray together and God will heal you through me. I mean, that's the kind of shit that we could expect, right? These people are like this close to accomplishing this. In fact, I think there are already chaplains in schools like right now. I could be wrong. Anyway, there's another dude that spoke at this event. Listen to this guy. This guy is David Williamson, co-founder of the Central Florida Free Thought Community.
If you're reconsidering draft policy 3.81, I'll point out again that Roman numeral 2, letter D, number 3 indicates that no matter what they say, as long as the chaplains believe it to be true, they cannot be accused of proselytizing.
Whatever they say, as long as they believe it to be true, they can't be accused of proselytizing. That is wild.
Calling kids severely mentally ill or victims of demonic possession, using threats of hell, are permitted by this policy as long as they believe it. I didn't make these things up. People in this room actually believe them. And if you're in the volunteer chaplain corps, that will be protected speech. If you think coaching will prevent that, you should seek legal opinions on what happens when the government attempts to tell clergy members what they can and cannot say.
Absolutely. See, this is why the church should never be involved in the state right here, because the state has a ton of like legal requirements that come with all types of different things. But the state also cannot regulate religious belief and shouldn't regulate it. There's a conflict here. It's a constitutional crisis. You cannot have the two connected to each other. It just does not work.
And according to Roman numeral 3, letter E, number 2, those conversations will be confidential and behind closed doors of an office paid for by our tax dollars.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. This is a demographic of people, priests, pastors, who have a problem with taking advantage of kids. And you know, that exists in every demographic of people, right? I mean, statistically, it's like 4% of the population or something attempts that. I don't know what the statistics are. But the Catholic Church and, you know, churches generally have this weird thing where they just don't, they want to cover it up. I don't understand how they got to the point where the Catholic Church thinks that it's a better idea to move them from parish to parish to protect them from legal consequences. Like, what are you doing? These people are in unique situations where they are in private conversation with children, alone, with no parents around, and it's extended conversation, alone in a room. There should be legal consequences for people who take advantage of this position. It's just, it blows my mind that anybody would think it's a good idea to put a priest in a school around kids. This is what tells me they don't care about kids. Oh, you're worried your kid's going to be taken advantage of in a bathroom because there's like a trans person in the bathroom or whatever. But you're putting priests in schools.
The ramifications of this are huge. The students will surely bear the brunt of it. For your clergy volunteer members as well, administrators will have to censor their remarks just to keep the peace. Assuming we even hear what was said in those confidential sessions. All this and more are why people are scared sick about a chaplain program. Not as much for the legal risk you're into, but the real harm that will be done when clergy are permitted to tell students what some of them really think about who they are, who they love, and how they act.
Yeah, that is a big problem. Students, you know what? Counselors should look at the scientifically the best way to handle these types of situations that will cause the least damage and do the most good and further the kids' emotional growth and academic growth as much as possible. That's not the goal of a priest. School is for educating kids. Priests are for indoctrinating kids. They're for convincing them that Jesus is real and that's it. You can't like connect them. You can't. And it's just like infuriating that these people are desperately trying to do it. Again, these things, I don't think that they're legal. And I think that they, it may go to the Supreme Court and it'll probably be challenged eventually. A lot of the things that they're doing right now, chaplains in schools and, Bible reading in school and all that other stuff. But in the meantime, there's like a whole generation of kids that are being subjected to absolute nonsense and indoctrination and everything, thanks to people like this guy right here, Ryan Walters. Thanks to him and others. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments.